This slideshow is about making a point, sometimes called a thesis or in a persuasive paper called an argument. But for this slideshow, I'm just going to keep it simple, have a point. As you know, I am a romance writer. Writing is one of my dreams, passions, great goals in life. And for a long time, I was not that successful. I got published, but my books didn't really sell well, and they were always sold as print on demand. That meant when someone bought one of my books, Amazon would print it and send it to them. There was no like big warehouse full of boxes of my books. They didn't exist until they were purchased. But then my publisher offered to do what's called a print run. That means they would print big boxes full of my books that would live in warehouses. And this was a real career maker for me. There's a lot of reasons why, which you don't need to hear me talk about right here, but it was a big career maker, and it was a risk on the publisher's part because they would be investing a lot of money in me without knowing whether or not those books would sell. So I had to do a good job writing this book. Well, it was during COVID, 2020, and I guess a lot of us were probably feeling pretty stressed. I wrote the first draft of the book, sent it to my editor, and she was like, "This is terrible." When she described to me why, I saw it all immediately. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. So I worked really hard. I did a revision. I sent it back to her. She read it. She was like, "I see that you changed everything, but it is now terrible in different ways." And as soon as she described to me how, oh my gosh, I totally saw it. It was horrible. So at that point, it was supposed to be done, but I got like 2 more weeks to work on it. And I was working so hard. And right about this time, my dad had to have open heart surgery. So I was taking care of my dad, taking care of my mom. And it was COVID. I was so stressed. I was like, this book is going to be terrible, but I have to finish it. I have to do this. This is my dream. So in between all the other things I was doing, every second I could steal, I was working on the book. I was working on the book in my car, outside the hospital, waiting for my dad. I was working on the book on the floor beside my bed. I was working on the book every possible second I could spare. And then to make things even worse, we had the big wildfires. So now I was managing my dad, my mom, their house, which was way out in the woods, just ready to spark up in flames. And I had to finish this book, and I was working on it every single minute. It was going to be terrible. It was going to be terrible again. It was going to be awful. I was going to fail as a writer, but I kept going and I kept going. And I sent it off the day it was due, and it turned out to be an enormous success. People loved it, reviewers loved it, people bought it, Amazon ranked it super high. It was the biggest accomplishment of my writing life. So, what's the point of that story? I'm going to argue that the point of that story is to persevere even when you feel like failure is crushing in on you on all sides. Keep going. That's the point. With each of the Huffington Post personal essays that I have shared with you, you'll find the author makes a point. In the case about poverty and food scarcity, I'm going to argue that the author makes 2 points. One is written here. It makes sense to stock up when you see a hot deal, but you can't do that when you only have $12 to last till Friday. Missing out on sales cost me more in the long run, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, there isn't a long run, there's only now. That's one major point the author makes. Here's another point that the author makes in that same essay. So many people love to sit in judgment of the poor, but unless you've had to buy 4 days worth of groceries with the change you found between your couch, cushions and car seats like I have, you'll never understand what it's like to have to make these kinds of decisions. And if you don't understand, you're not in a position to judge. You should just listen. That's another point that this author makes. And you'll notice that the points are bigger than the individual stories in the essay. The individual stories and examples illustrate the point. They support the point. They show us the point in the real world. And the same story can have multiple different points. You may have noticed this in your family or your friend group where two people interpreted the same event in very different ways. These examples are based on a student essay that I got that ended up being really, really good. The student had a little bit of work to do on it though as they were moving through the writing process, which is totally normal. So first of all, they presented an essay like this. I played an exciting game of football, I scored the winning touchdown, and our team won the championship. That was the whole essay. And I said, I'm happy for you, that's awesome, you're a rock star, but what's the point? If I don't care about football, and as your teacher I do care about you, but if I didn't, why would I care about this? What's the larger message that would make me care? That's the point. So one point this person might have made about that experience would be to say even if people never play sports outside of school, the victories they have playing sports can give them the confidence to succeed in all aspects of life. That is an interesting point that you can make about high school sports. Interestingly, you could make a different point about the same story. The emphasis we place on high school sports can leave people feeling like they peaked in high school. No other victory in their life is celebrated with the same massive community support. Therefore, early sports wins can leave people feeling empty and lost after the glow of victory has faded. That's another point that someone might make about this same story. Remember, as you are looking for your point or thinking about what you want your point to be, it's going to be something bigger than the details of the story, something that would mean something to another person, even if they weren't initially invested in what you were writing about. So here is my wife's softball team from some years ago. Why do you care that my wife's softball team won the Women's C League Softball Championship in Corvallis, Oregon, several years ago? My guess is that is not inherently interesting to you, but I could tell you stories about it that illustrated a larger point that would suddenly make those details mean something to you. They would illustrate a point that had value and resonated in your own life, even if you've never played softball. Now, I don't want to hide the ball on you. Points are not that original. They're true, but they're pretty universal. That's why they touch so many people. So a point that you might make in your essay would be, don't judge other people. That's one of the points made in the essay about food scarcity. Don't judge. So looking at this list of points, you can probably see something that resonates with you and which you could illustrate with examples from your own life. So what I'd like you to do now is to think about what you have chosen to write your first essay on, and now think about what point you want to make. And remember, there could be a lot of different points. It's best to just choose one, maybe two, because these essays aren't very long. They may feel long when you're writing them, but they're really quite short. Now, just one little side note as we're talking about the point of your story, the point of your life. There's a lot of pressure on students to pick a major immediately, pick a career path immediately, know what you're going to do starting your sophomore year in high school. And I just want to remind you that while there is a lot of benefit in planning, and it is good to discover your career early. That's not always how life works, and that's okay. A lot of people don't know what they want to do when they're 17 or 18. A lot of people have multiple careers. A lot of people change direction, and that's okay. So if you're feeling this pressure to know everything that you're going to do for the rest of your life, know that you don't have to know everything that you're going to do for the rest of your life. In fact, it would be a little disappointing if at 18, 19, 20, you knew everything that was going to happen to you from now until passing away. That's not how an adventure works, and life is full of adventures. So yes, pick a major, yes, go see your advisor, but don't feel bad if, and yes, have a point for this essay, but don't feel bad if you don't know exactly what you want to do or what the big point is right now, or even ever. That's okay.